Coming up today on LinkedIn News Live. Launching a startup is hard. Ensuring it grows in a pandemic with employees all over the world is even harder. We speak with one entrepreneur who's doing things differently as part of our Conversations for Change this Women's History Month. Plus, burnout on Wall Street, how firm leaders are responding. All that next. Hello, I'm Caroline Fairchild, and welcome to LinkedIn News Live, where the business conversation begins with you. It's March 24th, and here's a quick look at the top headlines trending right now on LinkedIn. City in Illinois first in U.S. to pay reparations. Pfizer tests pill for COVID-19, and burnout remains rampant on Wall Street. Let's take a deeper look into that story. After complaints from junior bankers about burnout, Wall Street firms are making adjustments, according to Bloomberg. Citigroup Inc. was the latest to implement new work-friendly policies by banning Zoom calls on Fridays. Joining us now to discuss is Riva Gold. She's news editor for us out of the UK. Riva, welcome. Let's talk about this. This is not a new headline. This is something that we've seen throughout our careers here in terms of Wall Street burnout. But how is the pandemic making this worse?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's absolutely no secret, but this has been an unusual year on Wall Street. In addition to the normal stresses of being a junior banker, you've had a flurry of IPOs, you've had a lot of deal activity, you've had an incredibly volatile year in markets and for the economy. And then on top of that, this is all happening when people are often working from home in workspaces that weren't sort of designed to be workspaces in the first place. And that whole pandemic element of burnout is really just exasperating for people already in a very, very tough work situation.
And this might be the most classic Wall Street thing I've ever heard, but to demonstrate just how much these bankers are working, there was a group of junior bankers at Goldman Sachs who put together a presentation demonstrating their hours. Tell us a little bit about that.
The analysts pointed to 95-hour work weeks, talking about maybe maximum 5 hours of sleep and just broadly inhumane conditions, as they described it, that were taking a physical and mental toll and ultimately, in their minds, were affecting their productivity. So that has caught a lot of headlines. And for once, we're actually seeing a response from a lot of these banks.
Right. We mentioned Jane Fraser, the new CEO of Citi, actually saying that we should just ban all Zoom calls on Fridays. So she implemented that. But is that really going to have an impact? Are they really not going to do Zoom meetings on Fridays? Does that mean they're going to have to catch up on those hours other days? What can leaders be doing right now?
It's a great question. You're seeing a range of responses from, Zoom limitations to handouts and Pelotons for first-year analysts. But ultimately, a lot of these things can help create some semblance of normalcy and some kinds of boundaries, but they're not really changing the fundamental culture of Wall Street. And as long as first-year analysts are kind of bottom of the pack in super competitive positions with really demanding clients and their output is measured by how well they're able to meet them and on what kinds of deadlines, it's hard to see a lot of fundamental change happening there.
And why is this change happening now? Burnout is not a new issue for the financial industry. Is the pandemic that's really pushing these leaders over the edge in terms of rethinking how the industry does work?
I think initially a lot of the sort of work from home issues were dismissed because it always felt very temporary. But now, even as vaccines roll out, a lot of leaders are seeing that work from home and a full return to kind of normal is farther away than we thought. And even when people do go back to the office, it's probably going to be in a form of hybrid or flexible role. And many people will stay remote. And that means you need to give these things much more thought about how do you create an intentional remote or flexible policy that allows people to feel comfortable, to have certain kinds of boundaries between personal and work life, and to be productive in their home settings in more than a kind of temporary, haphazard way.
Right. I saw that Jane Fraser said in an interview that this is just not sustainable. So it's at least encouraging to see that some leaders are coming out and saying that things need to change. Riva, as always, thanks for joining us on LinkedIn News Live.
Thanks for having me.
That was Riva Gold. She's news editor for us here at LinkedIn. And for more stories like these, be sure to check out the news module to the right of your LinkedIn feed. Or if you're in it mobile, you can click into that search box. As part of our Conversations for Change initiative for Women's History Month, we're speaking with female leaders across industries. And I'm excited to welcome Kimberley Ho to the show. She's the co-founder and CEO of Evereden. Kimberley, welcome to LinkedIn News Live.
Hi, Caroline. Thank you.
It's great to see you. All right. So we just were talking about burnout on Wall Street, which I'm curious your take on that. You started your career in finance. Talk to us a little bit about that and what spurred you to launch Evereden.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned because I was one of those Goldman Sachs first year analysts not that long ago, several years ago now. But my experience has been in finance. I spent 2 years as a Goldman Sachs investment banking analyst in New York City before moving on to investing in private equity, where I worked at a firm named Oaktree Capital, and I was mostly investing in consumer and healthcare companies and brands that ultimately, I saw behind the scenes what was going on in many of these brands that we as women use and love. And I just thought there was a safer, better, more efficient way to create a new kind of skincare brand, one that is multi-generational, serving the entire family, one that is premium and that also uses the best and safe natural ingredients. And so that was really the impetus for me starting Evereden. And it's been for almost 3 or 4 years now since I left finance to start Evereden. And I have to say it's been a great journey as a female founder and entrepreneur.
And I picture you in the hallways of Oaktree Capital being probably one of the only women there talking about skincare, talking about baby skincare. What was the response that you got while starting this company?
I think a lot of people in finance were really confused why I wanted to leave this gilded pathway to sell baby products. And I don't blame them. For me, I think I have a passion for skincare and a passion for clean skincare, especially. And I saw the most urgent need within family, where I think you've seen in the past couple of years, decades, just the amount of investment that has been going into women's skincare and beauty, billions of dollars. But that same investment and innovation simply has not occurred within family. And so, I have nieces and nephews, and I care deeply about, I guess, providing the best skincare products for them. And so I just saw a gap in the market, and it didn't really matter if people didn't think it was as sexy as private equity or investment banking. To me, this was a problem that needed to be solved. And I guess we've been on the market for slightly over 2 or 3 years now. And last year we grew 500% year over year in a time of COVID. And I think that just goes to show, if there's a real problem and you're addressing that consumer need, there is an opportunity in any market.
And I certainly want to get to how you have been growing your business in COVID. I'm sure there are a lot of people joining us in the stream who would love some tips and tricks there. But you mentioned this gap in the market. Why does it exist? Why aren't people investing in the products that they're putting on, arguably the people they love the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's because for decades now, these products, you called them baby products. They were commoditized. And I think today we at Evereden truly coined the phrase, I think, baby skincare. The idea that, and our chief scientific officer, Dr. Joyce, who heads up Stanford's pediatric dermatology department, she says it best. Skincare is not a vanity product. It's not a nice to have. Skincare and skin health is health. And so using the best skincare products for your children, for your babies, for yourself when you're pregnant or postpartum, these are pretty important things. And I think it's been ignored for decades because consumers simply did not have as much choice a few decades ago when it was just a couple big, CPG companies controlling various distribution channels. Today, you have a new skincare brand launching every other day on Instagram or online. And you've seen a lot of movement within the women's skincare space and women's beauty space, but just not the same amount of innovation, I think, in family. And so consumers are starting to ask for that. And, I think that's where Evereden comes in.
I just saw yesterday that Chrissy Teigen, I don't think it's skincare, but it's family cleaning products that Chrissy Teigen just launched yesterday, was it?
Yeah, that's right.
So big business. All right. Let's say hello to some members who are joining us in the stream here, Kimberley. We have Rhonda from Texas. Hi, Rhonda. Martha from Florida. Catherine from Virginia, and Dominique from Georgia. Thanks for joining us here on LinkedIn News Live. I'm here with Kimberley Ho. We're talking all things entrepreneurship and scaling a business during a global pandemic. So if you have questions for Kimberley, now is a great time to get them in the stream. We'll get them answered on the show here. Kimberley, let's talk the pandemic. I want to hear from you in terms of what have been your biggest challenges. Has it been distribution? Has it been customer acquisition? Talk to us.
Yep. When the pandemic first started, I think the supply chain environment was just a mess in the entire industry, and suppliers in China were either shut down or completely delayed in terms of their production capacity because people were just falling sick and factories were closing. Customers in Europe and the US were not able to pay some of these factories on time. And so I think you had a real mess where the biggest companies and brands were hogging up supply chains, and small brands like Evereden, we just simply weren't a priority to get ahead in the line to get, components, packaging components, raw materials to be able to make products and sell products. And that was a big problem to solve. I think the way we solved it is, unlike other skincare brands on the market, we do not go through distributors, and we have direct relationships with our manufacturers across the world. And so we have a sourcing team on the ground in China to speak directly with these manufacturers. And I think because of that direct relationship that we've built out in the last 2 or 3 years, we were able to, I guess, convince some of our suppliers to really put us ahead in the line, even though in terms of business opportunity, we're not, a mega billion-dollar company. But I think, it's just back to basics business. Treat your suppliers, treat your vendors, and like your partners. And that's how we got through the supply chain issue. And aside from that, I mean, I think, the pandemic has brought on different sets of challenges from a cultural leadership standpoint. I know you were talking about this with Viva just now, but, I've had to figure out as a leader how to lead remotely. A team that's, we've tripled and quadrupled our team. In the last year, we've hired a lot of people. And how do you onboard and I guess grow a team and keep that culture remotely and prevent burnt out? I mean, that's been a big challenge and something I'm figuring out currently.
Yeah, burnout is a heavy deal. And you talk about your materials coming from all over the world, but you're not only doing this remotely, but your employees are global as well. So they're coming to you from different time zones, and the pandemic is in different phases, I'm assuming, in different countries at different times. How did you manage it all? How did you manage your mental health during this just challenging time?
Yeah. I mean, I'm someone who really, just I get by putting my head down and getting to work, and that's how I guess I solve problems. And luckily for me, I think the business has been extremely, extremely busy, and so that has been, for better or worse, a distraction for me personally in terms of dealing with just the uncertainty and the volatility of the pandemic. But with my team, I think it's just been, me checking in on people, making sure they're doing okay. And I think for me personally, I have, I'm a big proponent of sort of a coaching style of leadership. And I think if you have that one-on-one relationship with your team members, your employees, and you can sense if, things are not quite right, I think that leaves way for open conversations and understanding, how they're doing, how they're feeling, and how you might be able to better help them as a leader.
And speaking of your team, all of your scientists are female, is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
Was that a conscious decision? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. The majority of Evereden senior leadership is made up of women, and most of them are women of color, which is, I think, something that is, what's quite important to me in terms of setting up this team. And for me, with Evereden, so much of what we do comes from a place of expertise and science. Sure, we use, the best in botanical, pure, natural ingredients, but we always ensure that they are backed up by actual research and data. And that's where our moms in medicine comes in. So our R&D team is made up of 3 amazing doctors who are also mothers. And together they, form all of the research and analysis and thought process that goes into every one of our products. And it was really important to us because 70% of our customers are moms and women. And so it was important to us that we were formulating, creating these products from a place of expertise, but also personal experience. What I found, as my time as an investor, like you said, I was one of the only women in most of my jobs. I was often mistaken for a secretary or a salesperson. And what I found was all of these decisions for mostly women in the consumer space were made in boardrooms full of older dudes who've never used a female deodorant. They've never used a perfume. So I guess when I got a chance to set up Evereden, I was very intentional about our leadership team.
Well, that's great. And actually brings us to a question that we have in the stream here. Rosa's asking, as someone who didn't necessarily have a background in skincare or science, what gave you the courage to do this?
Yeah. I think I remember my first supplier meeting with this guy who created baby products, and I just didn't know anything he was saying, and it was so embarrassing to me. But I think that so much of entrepreneurship is just learning as you're going. And what gave me the courage was, I guess, my family. Both my parents are entrepreneurs. I grew up in an environment where both my parents started a business together, and so that was my normal. I was a startup baby, and I guess they never figured it out. Till the end, when they sold their company, they were still figuring things out, and I think ultimately that was what gave me courage to leave and start something where I had no experience in whatsoever.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some members in the stream talking about, how did you deal with the naysayers? We have so many people having to pivot careers or change industries during this pandemic. What kept you going? What was your inspiration?
I think it's really important, when you're in that stage of deciding what you want to do and having those thoughts to, flesh out your ideas in a safe space, whether that's on your own or with very few, trusted family or friends who are positive, because there will always be naysayers in the world. And I think if you voice ideas that are not fleshed out to some of these people, they may not be, with ill intent, but they're, if they're naturally negative people and that's just how they operate, they are going to, unfortunately, I think, dampen your motivation and ideas before they're well fleshed out. And so for me, that was my husband, that was my family, and they really encouraged me to explore it further. And like the banker that I was, I was very much I listed out the pros, I listed out the cons, and at the end of the day, I had this whole Excel spreadsheet telling me that I should make this leap, but also I think it just felt right.
You sound like my husband. If he were in charge, we'd have an Excel sheet just for basically every aspect of our life. Let's say hello to some more members who are joining us in the stream right now. Maria from Washington, Tracy from New York, Janet from Michigan, and Amy from Indiana. Thanks for joining us here on LinkedIn News Live. And then I have a question here from Dominique. She wants to know, did branding practices change after COVID? Is there more pressure on social media, less on physical advertisement? How did you think about marketing during the pandemic?
That's a great question. I think every marketer is trying to figure that out urgently. You're right, completely. We've completely pivoted. We used to spend a good deal of money on events, community building, and all of that has gone to zero. And we've taken that to social media, exactly as you've said. And I think social media has become more and more important because that is our community space for interaction with strangers and other people. I think the realm of social media has become richer since the pandemic. I mean, you have Clubhouse that just launched a few months ago successfully. TikTok's really boomed during the pandemic. And of course, you have Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so many other platforms. And so it's being smarter and also more intentional about what you market on these different platforms. What you say on LinkedIn is very different from what you might say on Clubhouse, for example. And so I think as a marketer, it's really figuring out the messaging for each of these platforms and putting enough dollars behind it.
Well, I still haven't figured out Clubhouse myself, so I don't know if you have, but that's still a steep learning curve. Kimberley, before I let you go, there has just been a devastating rise in crimes against Asian Americans right now in this country on top of a global pandemic. I just wanted to check in with you. How are you doing? And also, how are you speaking to your team about these critical issues?
Yeah. I think it was a shock to everybody when it happened. And for our team especially, I think it was very saddening. And so much of what we do are for women and families and mothers. And I think, for us, it was just about, what can we do to make a little bit of change in a very terrible situation. And so we decided as a team to donate the proceeds of one of our top sellers, our shampoo products, to nonprofits operating in the Asian American space for the entirety of March. And yeah, we've just kept an open conversation within the team and checked in on how people have been feeling. And it's definitely been a hit to I guess the team, but we're doing okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, I see a lot of people in this stream thanking you for your leadership during this time. Sonia says, such a good message. It's okay to learn as you go. And Bonnie says, fantastic conversation. As a female founder, I can relate big time. So Kimberley, thanks so much for sharing your insights on LinkedIn News Live and joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was Kimberley Ho. She's the CEO and co-founder of Evereden. Tomorrow, we don't have a show, but be sure to tune in at 12 Eastern on Friday, where you can catch my colleague, Andrew Seaman, giving interview advice with Caffeinated Kyle. Well, that's going to sound like a very energetic conversation, so be sure to tune in then on Friday. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thanks for watching LinkedIn News Live.